Present us, O Lord, in all our doings with thy most gracious favour, and further us with thy continual help, that in all our works begun, continued, and ended in thee, we may glorify thy holy name, and finally, by thy mercy, attain everlasting life. Amen. Introduction of guests. I recognize the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you to all members of this Legislative Assembly, I would like to introduce a few family members that have joined with us here today. Today with us we have Pauline Gates and Ken and Linda Dornstadter in the front row here, Mr. Speaker. And this is a testament of in our family, and I think in fairness across the nation, all good things come from Saskatchewan. Mr. Speaker, my father's oldest brother years ago moved out to the community of Surrey, BC, a number of years ago with his wife of the time, who was from Saskatchewan as well, the sister to Ken Dornstadter. They lived their life, their careers as psychiatric nurses in that community. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, Marie had passed away a number of years ago. Mr. Speaker, Doug, my uncle Doug, continued to live in the community of Surrey. He later was then married to Pauline, and they reside in the Vancouver area, the greater Vancouver area yet today, Mr. Speaker, and are pleased that they are able to be here today to join us in our Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly. They're traditionally from their roots, their Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly. Mr. Speaker, and I ask all members to join me in welcoming them to this Legislative Assembly today.
Recognize the member for Indian Head Milestone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you to the rest of the chamber, I'd like to introduce three constituents of mine that are seated in your gallery. Mr. Speaker, they're the Okalitas from Fort Capel, the beautiful community of Fort Capel. Catherine, I'm going to have a little bit more to say about in member statements, and it's a great story, Mr. Speaker. But her parents are here, of course, Caroline and John Okalita. Both live in Fort Capel. John sells real estate for Hatfield Valley Agencies, but the Okalita family's been known in the business community for a very, very, very long time. Caroline also is an entrepreneur, Mr. Speaker. She designs jewelry and sells it, Mr. Speaker, beautiful jewelry that she designs from scratch, really, and is quite well known for that. So I would like, and when I do my member statement, I think you'll kind of see that maybe the apple didn't fall that far from the tree in this case, Mr. Speaker, but I would like all members of the Assembly to welcome them to their Legislative Assembly.
Recognize the Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for leave for an extended introduction.
Minister's asked leave for an extended introduction. Is leave granted? Recognize the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize the recipients of this year's Agriculture Student Scholarship. Seated in your gallery, Mr. Speaker, the Saskatchewan Agriculture Student Scholarship is an important part of the Government of Saskatchewan's commitment to developing young agriculture leaders. Each year, we recognize 4 young people for their passion and dedication to agriculture. This year's applicants were required to submit a video or essay based on their own personal food story. Again, this year, there were many exceptional submissions from young individuals from across the province. It is young individuals such as these who will drive the future success of the industry. Their passion to share their agriculture story with others is inspiring and helps build public trust in the industry. I will ask the scholarship winners to please give a wave as I announce their names. Kaylee Dorval of Glassland, Saskatchewan. Kaylee has been awarded the grand prize scholarship of $4,000. Kaylee is actively involved on the family ranch, from raising cattle to packing and selling delicious quality Saskatchewan beef. Her video submission discusses how her family cares for their animals and the land. They value animal health, so Kaylee's operation follows a herd health program and works with specialists to determine rations for their cows. Kaylee will continue to pursue her love of agriculture while attending Lakeland College in the fall to study animal science and technology. Congratulations, Kaylee. Our 3 runner-up winners of this year's scholarship program were each awarded $2,000 to put towards their agriculture studies. These winners were Caitlin Saucer of Churchbridge, Madison McNeil of Alameda, and Morgan Davey of Delisle. Caitlin's family has been involved in agriculture for 6 generations. In her video submission, she highlights the passion she has for the industry and the sustainable practices used on her ranch. Caitlin will be attending the University of Saskatchewan in the fall to work toward her Bachelor of Science in Agribusiness. Congratulations, Caitlin. Madison will also be attending the University of Saskatchewan in the fall to work toward her Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. Madison's scholarship submission was an essay focused on the evolution of ranching. Congratulations, Madison. Morgan's essay submission focused on the importance of farmers sharing their stories of food production to counter misinformation and increase consumer understanding. Morgan also plans to attend the University of Saskatchewan to pursue a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. Congratulations, Morgan. Thanks to each of you for your hard work and dedication to the agriculture industry. I ask all members to join me as I congratulate these 4 individuals on this outstanding accomplishment. I wish you all the best as you continue on a pursuit of your agriculture studies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As a member for Regina Northeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join with the Minister in welcoming Kaylee, Caitlin, Madison and Morgan to their Legislative Assembly and of course the people accompanying them. Mr. Speaker, it's always exciting to see young people excited in agriculture, pursuing their passion, pursuing that in their studies and hopefully their careers. So I'd like to again ask all members to join with me and the Minister in welcoming these young minds to our legislature.
I recognize the member for Martensville, Warman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very excited. I don't often get school groups. I think it's been about 2 years since I had one, so I'm very excited to welcome 29 grade 8 students from Venture Heights in Martensville. You want to give us all a wave? They are accompanied by their teacher, Tanya Robertson, Mike Zintel, Karen Height, and parent chaperones Dawn Rietdijk and Heather Sharp. And I'm looking forward to meeting with them after question period today. I will be a little bit delayed. It's second last day of session, so we have royal assent of bills. I don't know if you want to stay and watch that, but I will be joining you as soon as I possibly can, and I look forward to having a discussion with you and look forward to your questions. So I would ask all of my colleagues to welcome these students to their legislative assembly.
Presenting petitions. Recognize the member for Saskatoon University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to present a petition from citizens who are opposed to the federal government's decision to impose a carbon tax on the province of Saskatchewan. I'd like to read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan take the following action: to cause the government of Saskatchewan to take the necessary steps to stop the federal government from imposing a carbon tax on our province. Mr. Speaker, this petition is signed by the citizens of Moose Jaw and Saskatoon. I do so present.
As a member for Cumberland.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to present a petition on behalf of residents of Northern Saskatchewan. There is a definite need for a new long-term care facility in La Ronge area, and according to the Croft report of 2009, shows the area in code red. There was $500,000 allocated for planning that was spent, and the plan has been ready for years. Seniors are waiting 165 days on average for a bed and are being shipped hours away from loved ones. I'll read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Sask Party government treat Northern Saskatchewan senior citizens with respect and dignity and immediately invest in a new long-term care facility in La Ronge. Mr. Speaker, this petition is signed by many good people of Northern Saskatchewan. I so present.
As a member for Regina Rosemont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise once again today to present petitions on behalf of concerned people and small businesses and communities all across Saskatchewan as it relates to the imposition of the PST onto construction labour by the Sask Party government. Quite simply, this is a job-killing tax. The facts speak for themselves. Permits down all across the province, projects that are important to communities and important to the economy that have been shelved, and sadly, thousands of tradespeople that have lost their employment, Mr. Speaker. So many of those that have been forced from Saskatchewan in pursuit of employment. This is a damaging choice for our economy. It hurts the job front, Mr. Speaker, and we're calling, of course, for it to be reversed. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Sask Party government to stop saddling families and businesses with the costs of their mismanagement and immediately reinstate the PST exemption on construction and stop hurting Saskatchewan businesses and families. These petitions today are signed by concerned residents of Regina. I so submit.
As a member for Saskatoon, Newtana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm rising today to present a petition on the Regina Bypass project. The people who signed this petition would like to bring to our attention the following. Very few details about the Regina Bypass project are publicly available. So much is redacted, Mr. Speaker, despite it being the costliest infrastructure project funded by taxpayers in the province's history. Ministry officials identified and documented what they called major deficiencies in the project in an email that list has yet to be released in full for public review. In the Assembly, the previous Minister of Highways referenced the breach of an aquifer in Wascana Creek as an example of one of those major deficiencies. However, our current Minister of Highways has repeatedly stated on the record that there are no major deficiencies on this bypass. Saskatchewan people will be paying for this piece of infrastructure for the next 30 years, and in the interest of government transparency, these contradictory statements require clarification. I'll read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Sask Party government to immediately release a full unredacted copy of records detailing all minor and major deficiencies identified in the Regina Bypass project to date. And Mr. Speaker, the individuals presenting this petition today are from the City of Regina. I so submit.
As a member for Regina Northeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present a petition on behalf of some of the students who gathered on the steps of our legislative building here a few weeks ago, calling for real action to fight climate change. Mr. Speaker, we know that the provincial government is opposed to the Justin Trudeau carbon tax, and we also know that this government agrees that putting a price on pollution works because that is indeed what they put on heavy emitters in our province. But Mr. Speaker, it's not enough because, Mr. Speaker, greenhouse gas emissions in our province continue to rise. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, the people signing this petition want to bring to our attention that Saskatchewan has the highest greenhouse gas emissions per capita in all of Canada. Mr. Speaker, they want to bring to our attention that this government has failed to tackle climate change, has failed to reduce emissions, and doesn't have a real plan in place to help the environment. They want to bring to our attention that programs and funding for the environment have been slashed. And Mr. Speaker, this is evidenced by the fact that total payments under the Provincial Disaster Assistance Program keep rising as a result of the impacts of climate change. Mr. Speaker, in the prayer, the petitioners, these students, request that this Legislative Assembly enact a real plan and allocate appropriate funding in the provincial budget to tackle climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, helping families transition to energy-efficient homes, and encouraging everyone in the province to take real action to protect the environment. Mr. Speaker, the students signing this petition come from this city of Regina, and I so present.
Reading and receiving petitions. Statements by members. Recognize the member for Saskatoon University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many members know, I'm on a journey through addiction and have many to thank for my sobriety. As such, I rise in the Assembly today to recognize the Métis Addictions Council of Saskatchewan, or MACSI, which is celebrating 50 years of providing addictions and recovery services to the people of Saskatchewan. MACSI provides individualized treatment, empowerment, and hope through inpatient and outpatient services and drop-in day programming. With centres in Saskatoon, Regina, and Prince Albert, the organization reaches people all across the province. Its programs and services are unique, rooted in the Métis heritage and guided by traditional Indigenous teachings. Mr. Speaker, through its education programs, treatment and care, Maxi empowers its clients to make healthy choices so they can live free from the harmful effects of addiction. Our government appreciates the positive relationship that we have had over the years with Maxi and the role they play in the fight against addiction. We count on community-based organizations like Maxi that are on the front lines to advise what we can do as a government to better support addictions treatment. I ask all members to join me in thanking Maxi for its incredible work, helping countless Saskatchewan residents achieve wellness and live healthy lives, and congratulating them on celebrating 50 years of service. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As a member for Regina Douglas Park.
Mr. Speaker, this past February was a frigid month of snow and frost, but that didn't stop the Eastview Community Association from holding their annual Winter Carnival. Hear, hear. The event is an activity-filled day that brings together families living in the Eastview community in Regina. This year's event featured face painting, balloon sculpting, and snowshoe races. It was great to see people out enjoying the company of their neighbours. Despite the harsh temperatures we endured in February, the carnival was full of eager faces. Mr. Speaker, I was happy to once again attend this entertaining event. I helped dish out the tasty complimentary lunch to attendees. It brings me great joy to recognize the hard work that my constituents are doing to help build stronger communities. The Winter Carnival isn't the only event the association holds, Mr. Speaker. This is an active group, and there are many fun activities people can attend. They just held the Spring for Breakfast event on May 5th, and the Eastview Centre Family Fun Night is on the horizon, taking place May 23rd. Mr. Speaker, I ask that all members join me in congratulating the hard work the Eastview Community Association put into making this year's Winter Carnival another success. I wish them all the best and look forward to attending more events in the future. Thank you.
Recognize a member for Indian Head Milestone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize a very important constituent of mine, Catherine Okolita. Mr. Speaker, when Catherine was 5 years old, she felt inspired to serve her community of Fort Capel in any way possible. So she and her mom started Catherine's cause. Catherine has raised and donated over $55,000 for many organizations like Hospitals Foundation, Cancer Support Groups, food banks, and the local fire department, library, and eco-museum. Mr. Speaker, Catherine was named the Hospital of Regina Foundation's very first patient ambassador, recognizing her for her efforts in fundraising for the Z99 Radiothon here in the Queen City. This year, through an online auction, she raised just over $23,000 for NICU, making a significant impact on helping save babies' lives. She's also been recognized by the CBC as a Bright Light Award winner. Kathleen was the youngest recipient of this award. Catherine has received the National Philanthropic Day Award as Outstanding Youth Philanthropist, as well as the Young Entrepreneur Award from the Chamber of Commerce. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, she just recently was fundraising for a new play structure for her old pre-kindergarten, Mr. Speaker, the Kapachi Little Tots. Catherine's message of kindness and being a good helper is so powerful, it's something that we can all learn from. Though she is only 10 years old now, Mr. Speaker, she is wise beyond her years and has a heart of gold. Mr. Speaker, I'd like all members to recognize and thank Catherine and her family for all the work that they've done to this province.
Member for Regina Northeast.
We take requests.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleagues. Today I would like to commend the work of an extraordinary educator and a constituent of Regina Northeast, Mrs. Helen Sokoviev. Last week, she accompanied 7 students from Saskatchewan to Ottawa to be part of Encounters with Canada. They learned about Canadian institutions, developed civic leadership skills, and interacted with other youth from across Canada. This was not Helen's first time taking students to Ottawa for encounters, nor was it her second time. This was her 11th time, Mr. Speaker, and what is even more remarkable is that Helen retired from teaching many years ago. Helen taught in Regina for 32 years. The first time she accompanied students on an Encounters with Canada trip was in 1998, and at that time the ministry fully covered the costs for teachers to go. Even when funding for teachers was withdrawn, even though she had retired, that didn't stop her from going 9 more times. Teaching was never just an occupation for Helen. It was and remains part of her character and her identity. She continues to teach now and works as a supply teacher nearly every day in various schools across Regina. Please join with me in recognizing this hardworking, dedicated, and community-minded individual. I sincerely hope that she continues to pursue her teaching passion for many, many years to come.
As a member for Melfort. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a quote, "No one person is more important than the team." And for many students at the Melfort Unit Comprehensive Collegiate, this has become something that they live by. Our high school drama group, creatively called Team Drama, founded by Dean Armstrong, has quickly evolved to become one of MUCC's most popular groups, and it's easy to see why, when in just 3 years they've grown from only a few students to about 100 who have performed approximately 13 plays. The group's most recent performance, Dark Road, written by Laura Lundgren-Smith, won Best Overall Production at the Region 7 SAS Drama Festival, along with other awards such as Best Technical Production, Best Visual Production, and Best Technical Crew. The cast and crew were recognized and given multiple awards for acting excellence, technical theatre excellence, and performance excellence. The team had a chance to perform again at the Dr. William Riddle Centre in Regina and was rewarded with the Technical Performance Awards, multiple acting certificates of merit, and the George Falk Challenge Cup. The University of Regina Acting Award was given to our very own Hannah Linnell for her role as Lise, and The Dark Road received the runner-up award for Best Technical Production. Team Drama has made a lasting impact in MUCC. It's brought people together, made local history, and has created a tradition that will last long after the founders are gone. So congratulations to MUCC's Team Drama. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as a member for Saskatoon Westview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am pleased to rise today and announce the Government of Saskatchewan's continued commitment to career training here in our province. Today we announced an investment of $491,000 for Saskatchewan Association of Rehabilitation Centres, or SARC, to administer the Supported Employment Transition Initiative. This initiative provides community-based organizations across the province with funding to help those living with disabilities find employment. These organizations will develop innovative employment programs that focus on skill enhancement and job searching. Mr. Speaker, 175 individuals living with disabilities will receive help accessing the labour market through this initiative this year. The SARC has a partnership with the Ministry of Social Services through their representation of 90 agencies that are delivering services and supports to people with intellectual disabilities across our province. Mr. Speaker, frontline disability support workers in this province provide excellent care for the people they serve. That is why later this month, my colleague, the Minister of Social Services, will be celebrating these caring people by proclaiming Disability Service Professionals Week. This collaborative effort will help make Saskatchewan the best place in Canada for people of all abilities to live and work. I now ask all members to please join me in recognizing the SARC Supported Employment Transition Initiative. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As a member for Bigger Sask Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'd like to wish Bob Mason a very happy 100th birthday. Bob grew up in the Radisson Great Bend area in Saskatchewan. He actually spent his late teen years growing up during the Depression. In 1943, Bob joined the Army and served until 1945 in Europe and was awarded the Military Medal for Bravery. When he returned home, he met his wife Phyllis, and he began farming in the Jasper district south of Purdue. In the 1950s, Bob contracted polio and was told he would likely never work again. After much rehabilitation and support, he returned to working on the farm. After his farming career, he began to work building roads in Alberta and Saskatchewan. When he retired, he was gifted a set of golf clubs and began a 30-year love affair with his favorite sport. He also took up writing and is well known for his poem, The Story of War. He also is an avid writer for the Bigger Independent. His favorite pastime, though, was enjoying a cup of coffee, a slice of chocolate cake, and conversation. Bob is an inspiring role model to his 5 children, 9 grandchildren, and 15 great-grandchildren. I now ask all members to join me in wishing Bob Mason a very happy 100th birthday.
Question period. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a province, we have a pressing need before us, with among the highest rates of suicide in the entire country. We also have before us a bill from the member from Cumberland that would introduce a suicide prevention strategy and make a real difference, save lives in this province. In today's leader post, Jack Hicks, the professor from the College of Medicine, who's an expert in suicide prevention, said, and I quote, I paraphrase, I should be clear. If we don't support 613 today, we'll be the first provincial government in Canadian history to defeat, whether procedurally or through a vote, a bill to take concerted and coordinated action to reduce death by suicide. That would be a shameful first, Mr. Speaker, but it's easily avoided. The Premier could easily avoid that by standing up today and committing to passing Bill 613, the bill introduced by the member of Cumberland, and introducing a suicide prevention strategy in Saskatchewan. Will he do so, or will he be content to allow this important legislation to die on the order paper?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear.
Recognize the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, in this province, across the nation, suicide is a very serious, a very complex issue, a very complex challenge for many families, many communities, our province and our nation, Mr. Speaker, and it's this government that has been very focused on what can we do to support those in our communities with suicide prevention, Mr. Speaker, and we've taken action with respect to that. Most notably, the most recent budget had $30 million directly in it to increase our mental health supports in our communities and for our families across this province. Mr. Speaker, we have in this province and we've endorsed as a government the 10-year Mental Health and Addictions Action Plan. Mr. Speaker, this is an important plan for us to continue our work on, and we are addressing many of the recommendations within that particular plan. Mr. Speaker, we continue to work with our community-based organizations. We continue to work with our families on a number of different initiatives that I know we'll have the opportunity to list here, Mr. Speaker. Let me close with this. This is a very serious initiative, serious issue in our communities in Saskatchewan. It's one this government takes very seriously, and it's one that we'll continue to take very seriously in the months and years ahead.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that the Premier acknowledges the seriousness of this issue. I'm deeply disappointed that he chose not to take a course of action directly in front of him.
Shame.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we were joined by Joyce Duncan, Mr. Speaker, yesterday we were joined in this House by Joyce Duncan, and we heard her story of her life during World War II. And I think it impressed us all to think back to those times, to think of young people going off to war or off to factories to build munitions. This is a generation that's been referred to as the greatest generation. And they weren't called the greatest generation because they were the most affluent generation or because their life was the easiest. No, they were the greatest generation because they sacrificed for the freedom, the security, for the well-being of people they would never meet. And then they went on to build the structures, Medicare, our crown corporations, our entire social safety net that support our society today. Today, in our world, we face an existential challenge that is perhaps greater than any war, and that is climate change, something that will affect all of our lives in significant and very dangerous ways. Unfortunately, we have a government here today that seems to ask the question, how little can we do? Downplaying our own role in greenhouse gas pollution and failing to step up and show leadership. My question for the Premier today is, will he take the lead of that greatest generation? Will he stand up and set clear targets, real measures that will achieve them, and do our part in this essential global effort?
I recognize the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, we are a government, with respect just to a few words on the action that we're taking with respect to suicide prevention here in the province. Mr. Speaker, we continue to be a government that will invest and take action on all issues that are important to the citizens that we represent. That includes suicide prevention. It includes, Mr. Speaker, the second part of the question with respect to climate change and our contribution to climate change, of which we are aware of here in this province, and our contribution to the innovation that will ultimately, in my mind, address this issue at a global level. Mr. Speaker, we have put forward and discussed in this Legislative Assembly and in many other places across this nation, most notably and recently, I had the opportunity to spread the Saskatchewan story and what we have to offer this global challenge in the City of Toronto, Mr. Speaker. And it's important for us to share what we are doing in our plan of prairie resilience. That is a plan with our heavy emitters here in the province. It's important for us to share what we are doing with our methane action plan here in the province in reducing emissions. It's important for us to share what we are doing in agriculture, Mr. Speaker, what the good initiatives that have been put forward by our farmers in this province that are addressing climate change now, not only within the borders of Saskatchewan, but actually addressing climate change now all around the world as we are innovating and selling, through commerce, selling that technology, that innovation around the world, addressing what is not a challenge within just the borders of our province. It's a global challenge. In these global solutions, a conversation that Saskatchewan is more than willing to take part in.
Recognize Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The best way to deal with our problems is to dig into the evidence, learn from what has been done elsewhere, and use the evidence-based model. We have in front of us, when it comes to dealing with suicide, a evidence-based model that we've seen work elsewhere, could work here. This government is choosing to leave that model on the table and not take action. But when it comes to decisions, it's exactly what we should be doing, looking at the evidence. When that comes to decisions to act on climate change, we should be looking at the evidence in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, as well as the economic impact. The Premier referenced the Prairie Resilience Plan. We asked through FOI what the economic impact of that plan would be. The fact of the matter is they didn't check. They didn't do any of the homework. They don't know. That's right. On the other hand, there are a couple of reports that they did actually look into. One, they rolled out in June. The first one had some flaws. It had some flaws in the methodology, but worse, much worse, were the flaws in the presentation. Whether through intention or through incompetence, they misinterpreted the results and spread them out in a way that would create alarm and completely go far away from what the facts are on the actual impact. When asked about this report, the Minister of the Environment said, and I quote, "We commissioned this to have some academic research that would back up the belief that the government of Saskatchewan had." Now, that's a very strange way to do research, Mr. Speaker, and certainly no way to do evidence-based policy. The ironic thing is, at the same time, he had a report from Navius, from a reputable firm, but he chose to bury that report, which is very strange. There are problems with the federal carbon tax. There are reasons to make a case for a Made in Saskatchewan plan, but why?
I require the question. Finish your question.
My question is, why is the Premier, why is the Minister of the Environment chosen to be so irresponsible with the facts? Why have they hidden these reports from the Saskatchewan people?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP is accusing us of burying this report. Mr. Speaker, if that is so, well, then so did the NDP. Mr. Speaker, I understand the NDP received that report last year, but they never raised it until now, and only after the media first raised it. Mr. Speaker, why would that be? Maybe it's because they don't want to talk about their support for the Trudeau carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, what's more amazing is the NDP leader revealed yesterday in a scrum.
Member for Athabasca, please come to order. Recognize the Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP leader yesterday in the scrum indicated that he wasn't even aware of the report until Monday, Mr. Speaker. The NDP buried the report from their own leader, Mr. Speaker. Who is running the show over there, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we know why those members and their staff would want to bury that report from their own leader, Mr. Speaker. We know what they're trying to bury. That's their leader's support for the Trudeau carbon tax.
Recognize Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Social Services, please come to order. Recognize the Leader.
the decision not to act on climate change, the decision not to share the information they have on climate change, the decision not to make evidence-based policy decisions, that's deeply irresponsible, Mr. Speaker. It's almost as irresponsible. It's as irresponsible as the things they've been doing in regards to Estevan and Coronach. I want to read a quote, Mr. Speaker, from the Chamber Executive Director in Estevan, Jackie Wall, who said, "It's clearly time the community comes together to let the Saskatchewan government know that complacency is no longer acceptable, and we need provincial leadership to partner with our community to aid in coordinating a plan to transition." There are 1,300 jobs at risk in Estevan and Coronach. That's $15 million a year in wages, not to mention the economics.
Minister of Energy, please come to order. Recognize the leader.
$15 million a year in wages, not to mention the economic spin-offs of so much more in those communities. There's real...
Minister of Trade, please come to order. Recognize the leader.
Make no mistake.
Coal is being phased out, Mr. Speaker. But this government has no plan for the next step. I want to quote the Chamber again, who said that the provincial government has repeatedly stated that this transition is solely a federal responsibility. They have no plan to aid in transitioning Saskatchewan communities. To the Premier, is this true? Does he really have no plan? The Mayor, the Chamber of Commerce, the communities want to know, why is the Premier doing nothing to help Estevan and Coronach?
Recognize the Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, nothing other than investing over $1.4 billion in carbon capture and sequestration, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the NDP has simply lost the plot, Mr. Speaker. According to the CBC, and I quote, Miley said one thing that has come out with the Navius report is something that can be done about climate change. He said, and I quote, "We can take action on climate change and it won't destroy our economy," he said, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Cumberland, please come to order. Recognize the Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he said all of that using that report to make those comments. That report is preferenced.
Member for Windhoek-Nutana, please come to order. Recognize the Minister.
Speaker, he said all of that yesterday in the scrum based on a report that uses as its preface a carbon tax, Mr. Speaker. It's undeniable that he supports the Trudeau carbon tax, Mr. Speaker. It's no wonder they buried that report from him, Mr. Speaker. If I worked for him, I probably would have done the same thing, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we actually have a plan that will reduce emissions without a carbon tax, unlike the members opposite who talk a big game when it comes to the environment and presided over this province when they were government for 16 years when our greenhouse gas emissions went up 70%.
Here, here, here.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question, of course, was about coal communities, and this government's been nowhere to be seen in Estevan, in Coronach, when it comes to the discussion of transition. You've got 1,300 people working in mines, working in power plants.
Order, please. Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, you've got 1,300 people working in mines, working in power plants, whose jobs are on the line. When the coal phase-out comes, are they just hoping that's not going to happen? Are they just hoping it's going to go away? And they're abandoning Estevan and Coronach in the process? Because that's exactly what they're doing. We asked SaskPower, we asked the Minister for SaskPower what the plan was. That minister said, oh, talk to the Minister of Immigration and Careers. So we asked the Minister of Immigration and Careers. He said, go talk to SaskPower. All we've got is passing the buck, pointing to each other. Ministers.
Minister of Trade, come to order. Second warning. As the Leader of the Opposition, recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Working people deserve a lot more than this government and that minister passing the buck. Mr. Speaker, we have opportunities in southern Saskatchewan, in wind, in solar, in geothermal. There are opportunities in retraining, but those will only happen if the government engages in good faith, Mr. Speaker. Why is the Premier missing in action for Estevan and Coronach?
Recognize the Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, we are embarking upon the first utility-scale solar power generation in this province, 60 megawatts, Mr. Speaker, of which we've already RFP'd and successfully RFP'd the first 10, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are going to achieve a greater amount of renewable energy without a carbon tax than what the NDP in Alberta were going to do with a carbon tax, Mr. Speaker. Up to 50% renewables, Mr. Speaker, including geothermal, the first of its kind in this province, in this country, Mr. Speaker. That's going ahead with DEEP, Mr. Speaker, with the work on solar, with the work that we're doing, Mr. Speaker, on the work we're doing on something they don't want to talk about, carbon capture and sequestration, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's a way that we can help those employees and those communities, Mr. Speaker. We will be there for those communities, Mr. Speaker. We will be there to stand up against the NDP in Saskatchewan. We will be there to stand up against the federal NDP, Mr. Speaker, that don't just want to shut down coal. They want to shut down pipelines. They want to shut down oil. They want to shut down any resource they can get their hands on, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear.
The member for Regina-Rosemont.
Mr. Speaker, the trade minister, the economy minister, who probably wouldn't know what to do with a hammer and a nail, continues to ignore desperate calls from construction workers and builders all across the province who have been kneecapped by that government's choice to impose the PST. That government's choice is causing real damage. 1,800 jobs lost year over year. Building permits are down as well. Today, a new report from the Regina and Region Home Builders Association is again putting a spotlight on this government's decision to add the PST to construction labour. According to the report, Regina's residential construction industry is experiencing a heavy downturn, with this year's housing starts on pace to be the lowest in 11 years. In fact, that's a 67% decrease this year alone, and multifamily home starts are a quarter of what they were before, 72.5% decrease. You know, this minister refuses to roll up his sleeves, accept responsibility.
Ask your question, please.
A minister to take control of the things he can take control of, accept responsibility, and scrap this damaging tax.
Recognize the Minister of Trade.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite refers to a report which was very clear, the media report on that report, that the blame for the headwinds and challenges faced in the residential construction sector are to be laid at the feet of the national government, who have imposed significant stress test mortgage rules that have had a very detrimental impact on our residential building construction, Mr. Speaker. Those rules were put in place by the federal government, pointing specifically to two housing markets, Vancouver and Toronto, who they claimed were overheated, and therefore they put in place measures nationally that have had a significant and detrimental impact on this province. Once again, the federal government putting in place policies based on major urban centres that have had a detrimental impact on Saskatchewan. What we see opposite, though, Mr. Speaker, are members opposite who have again and again, every chance, every opportunity they get, defend the actions of the federal government, Mr. Speaker. We have a party opposite.
Next question. Recognize the member for Regina-Rosemont.
Mr. Speaker, we stand concerned and have given voice to the federal stress test. But the question here, Mr. Speaker, is about a government taking control for the things they control and owning up to the damage they've caused with the PST. And clearly, Stu Niebergall has identified that the PST has damaged the Regina construction industry. And of course, it's caused damage all across the province. An 11-year low, starts down 62%, Mr. Speaker, and far too many Saskatchewan people who are struggling, stressed, and falling behind as a result clearly deserve so much better. Stu Niebergall went on to say, and he's the president and CEO of the Regina Home Builders Association, that the industry is in a deep recession, resulting in serious job losses. That's the reality of Saskatchewan workers. Our call on that minister is to do the right thing, to scrap the PST on construction labour, to own up to his mistake, and put Saskatchewan people back to work.
Recognize the Minister of Trade.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. The premise of the member's question is completely undermined by the facts, unfortunately for him. The assertion he's making on PST in Alberta, Mr. Speaker, where there is no PST, Alberta, and I can look at the March year-over-year stats, Saskatchewan was third in urban housing starts by province, seasonally unadjusted. You know what province was in eighth, Mr. Speaker? Alberta, where there is no PST on construction. His entire argument is undermined. His premise is completely wrong. And as far as jobs, Mr. Speaker, 9 consecutive months of very significant year-over-year job creation, 14,800 jobs created over the course of the last year, 18,000 full-time jobs created over the course of the last year. We have heard nothing about that from members opposite, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is that this economy is creating jobs in the face of headwinds largely created by the Government of Canada, and the members opposite should give credit to our job creators for doing just that.
Hear, hear. The member for Regina Rosemont.
Mr. Speaker, who should we believe? Stu Niebergall, the home builders of Regina who have been hammered by this PST and who are putting a spotlight on it, or that minister?
Recognize the Minister of Trade.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it was made very clear in the report that the primary factor in the urban housing start challenges has to do with the federal mortgage stress test, and that's something that we've said repeatedly. That's something we've heard from stakeholders over and over again, Mr. Speaker. I addressed the PST issue in the fact that Alberta has a more challenging urban housing start situation despite having no PST at all, Mr. Speaker. What we've seen from the members opposite, though, the way that we're going to create economic growth is by creating jobs and having the conditions to create jobs. We have seen only 2 economic policies put forward, Mr. Speaker, from the members opposite. What are those? We oppose the energy sector, we oppose pipelines, and we support Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. That is all that they have put in the window, Mr. Speaker. They can stand with Justin Trudeau every day of the week, Mr. Speaker. We're going to stand with the people of Saskatchewan.
Hear, hear. As a member for Regina Lakeview.
Mr. Speaker, I can't stress this enough. Our education system is in crisis, and it's not just me who's saying it. Devin is a teacher in Regina. Last year, his first year of teaching, out of 26 students, 11 had high levels of need and 2 had exceptional levels of need. Devin managed without any EA supports, Mr. Speaker. In his own words, this lack of support combined with large class sizes is simply unsustainable. He says, quote, "I already know of 3 peers from my graduating class of 2018 that have left the profession." Mr. Speaker, what does the minister have to say to teachers like Devin who are trying to manage their complex classrooms, or to those questioning their future in the profession?
Hear, hear. I recognize the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, as the member knows, and I've stood on my feet a number of times in the legislature to talk about this, we understand some of the needs that are, and the challenges that are going on in our classrooms, Mr. Speaker. In spite of the fact that we have the largest education funding budget in the history of the province, Mr. Speaker, we know there continues to be challenges. Mr. Speaker, that's one of the reasons why we're going out and having conversations with teachers so we can understand, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we want to develop, Mr. Speaker, in consultation, Mr. Speaker, with our partners in education to build a framework around innovation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I spent a lot of time over the last number of days talking precisely about this. How can we work together, Mr. Speaker, to build an innovation agenda that's going to help relieve some of the stress and some of the pressures in our classroom, Mr. Speaker? All I hear from the members opposite, Mr. Speaker, is just back a dump truck full of money up to Mr. Speaker, and that's going to solve everything. Well, it won't, Mr. Speaker. Funding is certainly an issue, Mr. Speaker, but funding innovative ways, Mr. Speaker, with respect to funding, Mr. Speaker, and meeting the challenges in the classroom, that's the answer, Mr. Speaker, and that's the course this government's going to take.
As a member for Regina Lakeview.
Mr. Speaker, it's not just teachers who are being impacted by increasingly complex classrooms and the lack of additional supports. Devin says he is expected to have 30 students this upcoming school year. While he does his very best to work with his students, this is going to be a challenge. And as we hear from teachers right across the province, he says, quote, I won't be able to provide the rigorous instruction that my students deserve. And he goes on to say, the needs and numbers in my class demand more time than what I have available in a year, end quote. Mr. Speaker, if the minister has truly been listening, then why is he continuing to let Devon, his students, and others like him down by sticking to those Sask Party government lines?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our commitment to public education has been pretty clear over the last couple of years, Mr. Speaker. Record investment in public education on the operating side, Mr. Speaker. Significant investments on the capital side, Mr. Speaker, and I don't think anybody can question that, Mr. Speaker. But having said that, we have been talking to people. We've been talking to teachers like Devon. There's a number of teachers that we've been having conversations with so that we can fully understand the impacts in the classroom, Mr. Speaker. And those are discussions that we're having with school boards. The member's been a school board trustee. She knows that the funding that's provided to the school boards is provided on an unconditional basis, Mr. Speaker, and they can make decisions as to how they're going to deploy those, Mr. Speaker. But again, the key issue here, Mr. Speaker, is deciding how we're going to be innovative with respect to delivery in the classroom and delivery with respect to funding, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you that I take this very, very seriously, Mr. Speaker. I know the member opposite has a deep passion for public education. Mr. Speaker, she didn't become a trustee because she didn't. But I've been a trustee as well, Mr. Speaker, and I understand these issues. And I understand that the only way to solve these issues in the classroom, Mr. Speaker, is to be innovative. It's to have conversations with all our partners in education to find the best path forward, to make sure that our children, Mr. Speaker, are getting the best quality education in a system, Mr. Speaker, and I'll end with this, one of the best education systems on this continent, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm very proud of each and every educational professional, Mr. Speaker, that delivers services in the classroom to the children of the future.
Hear, hear.
Ministerial statements. Introduction of bills. Presenting reports by standing special committees. Orders of the day. I'm advised that His Honor, the Administrator, is here for royal assent. All please rise.
His Honor, the Honourable Robert Richards, Administrator of Saskatchewan.
Pray be seated.
May it please your honor, this Legislative Assembly at its present session has passed several bills which, in the name of the Assembly, I present to your honor, and to which bills I respectfully request your honor's assent.
Your Honor, the bills are as follows. Bill number 142, the Proceedings Against the Crown Act 2018. Bill number 143, the Proceedings Against the Crown Consequential Amendments Act 2018. Bill number 144, the Real Estate Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 151, the Personal Property Security Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 154, the Intestate Succession Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 147, the Oil and Gas Conservation Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 148, the Pipelines Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 155, the Legislation Act. Bill number 156, the Legislation Act Consequential Amendments Act 2018. Bill number 159, the Securities Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 163, the Legal Profession Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 164, the Statute Law Amendment Act 2018, number 3. Bill number 134, the Local Government Election Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 135, the Local Government Election Consequential Amendments Act 2018. Bill number 138, the Miscellaneous Statutes, Government Relations Enforcement Measures Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 136, the Apprenticeship and Trade Certification Act 2018. Bill number 137, the Sask Energy Miscellaneous Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 139, the Foreign Worker Recruitment and Immigration Services Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 153, the Saskatchewan Employment Leaves Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 165, the Workers' Compensation Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 149, the Police Regional Policing Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 150, the Seizure of Criminal Property Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 158, the Youth Justice Administration Act 2018. Bill number 169, the Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency Act. Bill number 157, the Education Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 133, the Legislative Assembly Election Dates Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 152, the Builders Lien Prompt Payment Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 141, the Interpersonal Violence Disclosure Protocol, Clare's Law Act. Bill number 168, the Justices of the Peace Amendment Act 2019. Bill number 145, the Residential Services Act 2018. Bill number 140, the Animal Health Act. Bill number 162, the Irrigation Act 2018. Bill number 170, the Mineral Taxation Amendment Act 2019. Bill number 160, the Trespass to Property Amendment Act 2018. Bill number 161, the Trespass to Property Consequential Amendments Act 2018. Bill number 171, the Income Tax Amendment Act 2019. Bill number 172, the Saskatchewan Employment Paid Interpersonal Violence and Sexual Violence Leave Amendment Act 2019.
In Her Majesty's name, I assent to these bills.
May it please your honor, this Legislative Assembly has voted the supplies required to enable the government to defray the expenses of the public service. In the name of the Assembly, I present to your honor Bill number 173, the Appropriation Act 2019, number 1, to which bill I respectfully request your honor's assent.
In Her Majesty's name, I thank the Legislative Assembly, accept its benevolence, and assent to this bill.
Recognize the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this House do now adjourn.
It's been moved that this Assembly do now adjourn. Is it the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. This Assembly now stands adjourned until tomorrow at 10 a.m.